So I just want to guess, what's the password? Yahoo !1 or? Well, anyway, so yeah, feeling safe is not the same it's not the same as being safe. This is the title of my presentation for today because I want to tackle an important part of cybersecurity, not necessarily for tools and all the others, but I want to underline something that silently shapes our decision making when it comes to cybersecurity. So today, I have to be honest, I had a very difficult time choosing the subject. It was an unfortunate event for me that I had to go through all these angles which I could tackle cybersecurity, but all in all, you will see what this presentation will be about. Initially, I started thinking about business. I have a business background, and I wanted to discuss about the money that we're spending on cybersecurity. And I found out a lot of interesting stuff, things like, for instance, companies worldwide spend more than $200 billion a year to secure their products. That's more than the GDP of some, not only small countries, but even medium ones. However, when we calculate the effects of cybersecurity incidents, that rounds up to trillions. So regardless of how much we invest in cybersecurity, it seems that we still have incidents that take organizations by surprise. Then I wanted to discuss about telecommunications. I know we have someone here from the telecom industry. I just recently found out. I also used to work in telecommunications for 14 years before I joined Diconium. And I know for a fact, for instance, that every time a telecom vendor designs a network, they have this slogan of never to fail. They design networks in order not to fail, and therefore they have redundancies. They have all these things put in place. They never go to production unless it's measured and made sure that it is completely safe. Now, that is also the reason why maybe you know that our phones, or if you want our connection to the telecom networks, doesn't fail that much. More or less we find out things like, my signal is weak, or things like this, but you're never out of touch, you're never out of signal. They are investing a lot in this part. And I wanted to say a few words about this, but then I also tackled this angle from the cloud platforms point of view. I wanted to underline some struggles that I have and my colleagues have here as software developers, data engineers, product owners, about the things that and the amount of time that we spend trying to stay compliant, trying to figure out every certification that we need to pass, and so on the projects that we're working on day-to-day basis. But when I tackled these angles, in my head all the time, when I started to do the presentation, it all summed up to the same thing. Basically, what's behind all this? Yes, of course, we spend a lot of money. Yes, our phones are vulnerable in front of threat actors. And yes, we spend a lot of time trying to be compliant. But why do we do this? And the core emotion that we have behind all this is this feeling of being safe. So today I want to discuss about cybersecurity, trying to understand the humans that use it and how we're using it. And I will try to do this from a psychology standpoint. I'm also a graduate of the faculty of the University of Psychology here in Bucharest. I've majored in human behavior and social studies, so you're on good hands on this one as well. All right, so when we say cybersecurity, most of us picture very specific things. Depending on the line of work that you're on, depending on what you're doing on daily basis, you might think of cybersecurity as either something related to tools and technology, like firewalls, antiviruses, SIEM tools, that's the German, and encryption, zero trust policies, things like this. Or you might think of cybersecurity from systems and infrastructure angle. Here is where we have servers, networks, data centers, cloud platforms, or maybe even controls and mechanisms like policies, controls, vulnerability scans, penetration tests. We do a lot of those things here in Diconium as well. If you ever worked in a SOC, Security Operations Center, or not, you will be familiarized with dashboards, alerts, logs, KPIs, all these things. Or if you're working in quality more or less, then you'll be familiar with compliance, with audit, certification, standards, or risk assessments. But if cybersecurity will only be about these things, then why do we still have security incidents? Well, the main reason is that security doesn't start in the data center. It starts in the human brain. And I will try to break this down in a very practical way, because it all starts with emotions. Emotions are the ones that actually drive most real-life decisions. Yeah, we have fear, for instance, fear of doing a mistake, fear of being blamed for that mistake, but also comfort plays a role here. Everything is green, then I don't have anything to do. Why bother? Why search for something else? Anxiety might tell us something might be wrong, but at the same time, relief says, well, if there's nothing here to do, then leave it as is. And in time, this familiarity builds overconfidence. Then we start to trust the systems and the process that we're doing. Well, I've done this 1,000 times. I know it works. So this changes the way we perceive things. And none of this, anyway, it's irrational. It's just human behavior. It's how we're designed to be. Then there's needs. Needs, from a psychological point of view, there are fundamental human motivators. Here, we all have the need to feel safe, to be in control, to have certainty while navigating complex things and complex environments. We all have this need of belonging. If we see people doing things a certain way, we don't want to stand out and question the way they're doing it. And also, of course, we want to be efficient, do things in such a way that we don't create friction. So security controls that fight against these needs are often bypassed by our brain. So this is happening not out of malice, but because of necessity. Then we have pressures. Pressures, again, psychologically, they are just context that shapes behavior. Things that make us act differently than we would normally have. Time pressure, that's one important factor here. Of course, under time constraints, we tend to do things faster, we lose the full picture. Cognitive overload, this reduces our ability to evaluate. Then we have multitasking, who manages to fraction attention, basically. We're no longer capable of having the right mindset when we do a task from beginning to the end. We have interruptions, where we are moved out, we are pulled out from a state of flow, from a state of where we are actually doing our thing. We are in that flow, in that state of mind, we're concentrated, and the interruptions pull out from that state. And fatigue, of course, reduces the resistance, our capacity to resist in stress. So under pressure, the brain doesn't look for the best decision, it looks for the fastest acceptable one. Then we have cognitive shortcuts. This refers to automatic thinking, and I will tell you a bit about this further on. But trust is a very important shortcut that our brain uses. And about trust, I will talk in more detail later on. Assumptions slowly begin to form when we see everything working just fine. We make this assumption that, yeah, everything works, everything should work. Then habits start to form, and quietly, familiarity introduces routine. Everything becomes routine in our daily lives, in our ordinary lives. And these shortcuts are not laziness. They are just how we survive complexity. Now, perception and attention. What we notice and what we don't notice. Of course, we all have selective attention, but from the human brain point of view, we only see what stands out. What fades in the background is never seen. Visual reassurance refers to all our green dashboards that we see every day, so which actually tell us, move along, everything works just fine. And if you ever worked in operations in general, you would know that every alert that pops up too often, it gets ignored at some point. It's there, it happens, nothing bad's happening, then it gets ignored. And this state, this risk state that we run, begins to be normalized. It's something that we actually continue to work on without realizing it. So what feels normal stops being noticed. And last but not least, we have social influences. These are often underestimated, but it refers mainly to authority. Authority is important. If you see an email coming from IT or from management, you trust it. Social proof, you see people do things a certain way, you tend to follow. Responsibility diffusion, in larger organization, every time something happens, we tend to say, someone should already take care of that, or someone else is for sure taking care of that. We trust the people that we know. In a workplace, we always trust the one besides us, and we don't like to question the way things are happening around us. And these social cues are often replace our judgment. We don't actually question what's going on. We just go with the social cues and go on with that. And all of these, let's call them forces, work quietly, continuously, and simultaneously. They work at the same time. They put pressure on us on a daily basis. And cybersecurity doesn't fail because people are careless. It fails because people are humans, and this is how we're designed. And this is how we are trying to manage complex situations, complex environments with limited time, energy, and attention. All right. So from a biological point of view, feeling safe is not optional for humans. We need to feel safe in order to function. It's a prerequisite for functioning. If we don't feel safe, our mind goes to survival mode. Then we become more reactive. Then we narrow our thinking, and we only look for immediate success, for immediate wins. We don't see the big picture. On the other hand, when we feel safe, anxiety lowers, focus increases, and then we become more and more productive. That's the main reason why people really need to get this. People are looking everywhere for these signs. It's something embedded in us. It's a neuroscience, let's say, backbone of our brain, to constantly look for signs of reassurance, to make sure that we can function and focus on something more important and the tasks at hand. And organizations know exactly how to do this. Green dashboards, certifications on the wall, KPIs trending in the right direction, everything. These are signs that show us that, hey, everything works just fine. You can focus on the next thing. And all these things that we constantly see in our day-to-day work, every time we open Azure or whatever other cloud platform that we're working in, we see everything, or at least all those dashboards are not displaying that much red. They just don't show us a reality, or they just don't show us the state of the systems. They also regulate our emotions. They make us feel safe, so we can go on with our job. And trust, as I've mentioned before, is a psychological trust. It's a psychological shortcut. And in psychology, or if you want, in word psychology, it's not just a value or a belief. It's also a shortcut that allows us to navigate through complex things. I will give you one example. For instance, if you build a bridge, or if you want to build a house, and you overlook the whole thing, you don't need to know every nail, every brick that's been used, who's doing it, who's delivering it. You just need to have it done. You won't spend that much time looking at it. And our brains are very good at automating things. I know we have a lot of tasks about automation and it seems difficult, but our brain does it amazingly well on its own. So trust is just a mechanism that allows us to say, hey, this is fine. I can move on to the next thing that I need to do. Because trust saves time, trust saves energy and reduces cognitive overload. It allows us to get things done. All right. Yeah. But then we have this this point where everything starts to drift. Security at some point becomes it starts to drift from a state to just a feeling. We feel safe. We think that everything is just fine around us. We know that familiarity, for instance, it starts to create an how to call this, an overconfidence. That's the main reason. We try to have enough confidence in our system in order to trust our lives with it, so to say. And if security looks fine and we overlook it, then then illusion starts to come in. Therefore, once this illusion sets in, we have another thing starts to produces in our brain, expectations. We start having expectations. And they sound more or less something like this. We trust our system. We expect our systems to work. We know them, we've worked before, and this way of thinking is not something that comes from arrogance or something that just sees that we are careless or in any way. It comes from experience, because most of the time our systems do work. Redundancy does kick in. And every time we encounter an outage, it's not the outage itself that shocks us. It's actually the breaking of one of our expectations. How this works is mainly, or maybe I will just give some examples later on the next slide. I've chosen these two because they happened long enough in the past, so we don't create any friction on these topics. They are known enough. In all my searches, these two were the ones that popped up the most, and all in all, they really illustrate this situation, I think, the best. For instance, the Facebook outage in 2021, it didn't happen because of an attack. It wasn't any hacker involved. It was just an internal change that was done within the company. That left Facebook out of the internet, pulled Facebook altogether out of the internet. At that point, billions of people were affected, and also other third parties were affected by not being able to authenticate in their apps because they were using Facebook Authenticator. This happened from or due to a trusted internal change. People trusted the process. People trusted the engineer who was doing that. People trusted everything that was there. And also they made these assumptions that if something would fail, it will be contained. It won't go worldwide. We also have, and this is also something that happens to us. Now, when we imagine an outage, we only think of, well, if it happens, redundancy will kick in. It will only last a few seconds. The impact will be contained, and the restorations will be done almost instantly. But these assumptions all collapsed when the system reacted in a very unexpected way. And again, it wasn't due to any attack. Similar, the same process happened in the SolarWinds case in 2020. This was a case where the hacker themselves, or himself, didn't have to penetrate all the other users from the company's logs. They just had to infiltrate within one small update that everybody had to do. The product was called Orion. They inserted malicious code there, and everybody, when they saw this digitally signed, perfectly wrapped update, they trusted the process. The process was anyway set on automatically. Yeah, so it just went on. So the vendor was trusted, the updates were trusted, and trust was exactly what amplified the impact. It was also a case of having the wrong assumptions. And if you want, it's also another case which I like it a lot. I don't know, I was 10 when Titanic came out, and that movie stuck to me somehow, but it's not only about the movie, it's actually about the boat itself. If you remember, it was called the Unsinkable. And everybody trusted that it was unsinkable. They didn't bring enough lifeboats on, they didn't have enough life jackets on. And all this due to one line, because they actually wrote the White Star Line, the guys who built the Titanic, they had one line in one newspaper calling it the Unsinkable. And its maiden voyage. It was the first time that it went on onto the seas. And even though, and no one questioned the fact that, why do you call it unsinkable? It's never been. It's nothing like a situation where, okay, it's been doing hundreds of voyages, has gone through icebergs and made it. No, it was the first time. It never sailed, and people trusted it with their lives. And the pattern was always the same. We believe we are secure, we expect no failure, and we trust without questioning. And cybersecurity fails at the intersection of these three mainly, of illusions, expectations, and trust. And of course, this isn't just about big companies. This applies to individuals too. Phishing, for instance, I think we're all familiar with that. Maybe some of you already has been the victim, or at least someone tried to do this to you as well. So phishing things don't work because people are careless. It works because it feels familiar, routine. It's expected to happen. It's something that we expect to see. For instance, an email looks normal. It comes from certain people that we know, or at least it seems that it does. Therefore, we follow with what they request us to do. So trust does most of the work. And remember one thing, that trust actually is the biggest attack surface that we have. It's the one that is most exploited by hackers, because they are not forced, or they don't have to break into systems if they can borrow trust. If they manage to do this, then most of the work it's only done. When they imitate authority, when they mirror routine, they exploit the perfect timing, then trust is just there to scale it. So when trust becomes automatic, then exploitation becomes easy. Same thing happens to information itself. We trust information that looks professional, that has the right credentials. We trust what confirms what we already believe. And when information stops being evaluated, then perception can be shaped. So here's the core idea. Feeling safe is not the same as being safe. Trust is necessary. It gets things done. It gets complicated things done. But unexamined situations like this, or let's say actions, don't. Unexamined trust is dangerous. That was the point, but I forgot what I wanted to say. And not because it's wrong, but because it quietly replaces attention. And awareness is the difference between these two situations. Because security doesn't start with control, it starts with awareness. So my ask is simple. Don't eliminate trust. Don't try to control everything. Just make awareness a conscious choice, especially when everything starts to feel safe. Because awareness is not paranoia. Cybersecurity is not about making people afraid. No, but noticing when things are too quiet, when things are too relaxed, then start questioning that. And ask yourselves maybe, what am I trusting right now that makes me feel so safe? And why do I trust it? So that's all I wanted to share with you today. Not a solution, not a checklist, just another way to look at cybersecurity from a psychological point of view. Thank you.